Good morning, church. Great to see you all today at all of our campuses. Thrilled to be here today. Wrapping up this final series, Nuts and Bolts, on the greatest message ever told and still to be shared, the Sermon on the Mount. Before I dive into the message, though, I'm a person that loves to help people. And a couple weeks ago, Zach shared that he still can't figure out fully, what is the flathead screwdriver, what is the Phillips screwdriver, right? And so I thought I would share how I do this. And Zach, if you're watching, here's the way to know. The flathead is the screw that just has one line through it, and then a flat thing fits in it. But here's the real key. And this is the discipleship Christian key that we get even greater. The Phillips, the screw has a cross in it. And then Philip was a disciple. So you know that your Phillips is the cross one. So there you go, Zach. Now go out there and fix something at your house or do something that is helpful. Do the dishes, do something. So, all right. I'll hear about that on Monday for sure. Hey, couple of quick things. I had a great friend who, when she was younger, she scored the ultimate job. She worked for a major news network, and she was the vice president of marketing through the Midwest region. It was a big deal. And she went and needed a new house, and so she had money to burn. And she walked through one of those model homes where it's all done and it says, here's what it looks like. And it's got everything decored and all that stuff. And she fell in love with it. And so what she ended up doing is she said, I want this house. And they said, great, it's yours. And she said, hold on. And I want all the furniture and all the pictures in it. And they said, what? She goes, listen, I just don't have time to furnish it. I don't have the stuff. She said, I'm single. I don't have a ton of family photos. These families look nice. These pictures look nice. I'll take it all. And when you would go to her house, there were like people, and you'd be like, who are they? She goes, I don't know. It came with the frame. She goes, but isn't it a nice looking family? Right? I still remember putting this up. This actually is on the outside of our house. It's on the wall that's there. Someone from here gave this to us, actually. And we have this. It's home is where love resides, memories are created, friends always belong, and laughter never ends. Today, as we wrap up Nuts and Bolts, we're talking about the finishes. What makes your home the home? The finishes of discipleship. And as we're building this life of a disciple, what really matters at the end? What makes our life really a place where we say, it's been a good life? How do we live that out? And so today, we're going to wrap up with Jesus' words through Matthew 6. And I'm going to use actually the Message translation as our scriptures throughout. And we're going to look at the finishes. What does a disciple look like? And I want to remind us, by the way, you're never done forming as a disciple. We're always growing in our discipleship. From the one who is lifelong journey and has come far and is mature in faith, to the one who's very new in faith. We continue to grow closer and more in love with Jesus. So we're going to discover three things today, three realities about our finishes and ways for us to remember this as I put them into three letters for each of us to know. First, we're going to discover TNT, treasures in treasure. Where's your real treasure? We're going to discover Lynn, L-Y-N. How do you love your neighbor? Loving your neighbor. And then the last one, probably my favorite, pop. Peace out, people. All right? So we're gonna discover these three things as we journey as a disciple on the finishes of our discipleship life, the house of God, this temple that is God's. So, treasures in treasure. Let's dive into this, and what does this look like? And I think one of the things whenever people hear that we're going to talk about what does it really finish, what is our treasure, is we start to kind of wonder and say, oh, is this the message where you're going to tell me like I can't have anything that I like? I can't spend money on anything that I want, that I need to live like a pauper, I need to live like Mother Teresa, and then this is really what Jesus wants from me. And I'm here to say to you, no. That's not a proper message. God didn't bless us with these things of the earth for us to be in a constant denial of ourselves. There's not a competition of who can sacrifice the most in order to be closest to God. But I do think it allows us to look at the polar opposites and say, where are we at in the middle? I had some people that I went to go visit their home probably 10 or 15 years ago, and I was blown away. It was the first time I had ever been in a house like this. A friend of the senior pastor actually wouldn't let me visit the home for the longest time. He always would say, yeah, don't go there, I'll take that one. And then finally, like, he was out of town, and it was like something happened, and I had to go. And I opened the door, and it was the home of a hoarder. Like it was truly a house that there was a small little aisleway, and it was newspapers and Christmas trees and magazines and all the, like, and I was like, I had never experienced such a thing. And everything really mattered to them. Like, I even asked, and I just said, have you ever purged at all, just even a little bit? And they were like, no, you don't understand, Greg. Everything's really important. And then I heard the saying that I just don't know if that was even true, but they said, we know where everything is. You can ask us, and I could find it. And I was like, wow. But everything mattered, and they all became treasures. And I was reminded with my daughter later on, she would keep everything. And I would be like, hey, honey, like, I think this is a few years old. This was a beautiful picture that you painted just, I don't even know when, not even in school, maybe just on a day of crafts when we were doing, it was raining. And she would say, Daddy, that's a treasure. And I always said, if everything's a treasure, nothing's a treasure. So then we would just secretly throw things away, right? So, but then also I have a friend, and he is single, and he's just a person that says, I don't really need anything. He lives as a minimalist, and that's his desire. And so he has a full scarcity mindset. And so this isn't actually a picture of his fridge, but it is the same. Like, in his fridge, all there is one thing of Kraft American Singles cheese. And I said to him, I said, Chris, like, what do you eat? And he goes, oh, if I'm hungry, like, I'll go out to dinner or Grubhub or I'll order something. And I said, well, then explain to me, A, why you have a fridge, and then B, why it's just American Kraft Singles. And he goes, that's like if I get a late night snack. I was like, okay, like a full fridge for that, right? So scarcity mindset, doesn't have many clothes. He has a certain number of T-shirts, one for each day, and that's it, right? Like, and so he has this whole scarcity mindset. And I want us to say, when we talk about our treasures, and when Jesus talks about our treasures, he's not talking about either side. He's talking about a focus and a priority. And so I don't want you to hear this message and think, I've got to either give up everything, I can't keep anything, because nothing should be my treasure in this world. That's not what Jesus is saying. And so when we discover this, notice the priority and the focus of what Jesus is leading us to. Right? And that's where we look different. Not in these like, I'm either a hoarder or I'm not a hoarder. I'm scarcity or abundancy. So in Matthew 6:19, it says, don't hoard treasures. And again, this is the Message paraphrase. Don't hoard treasures down here, where it gets eaten by moths and corroded by rust, or worse, stolen by burglars. Whenever I hear the word burglars, in my head, this is probably my generation age thing, like the Hamburglar kind of pops up in my head, that guy, right? So, but don't hoard your treasures down here, where they're going to get eaten by moths and corroded by rust, or worse, stolen by burglars. Meaning this, like, don't hoard and say, like, it's all about my treasures in this life. And I think what can happen, and I have to guard myself on this, because I do think we all have things that we look at and we say, this is where my priority is, this is where I have. And I've got something that probably comes out of my family system theory, and Lori and I have talked about this, because I've noticed, especially probably the last decade, I've noticed that I can easily have an unhealthy trend in my life. For me, an area that I really have to watch that I don't hoard my treasure is in my retirement and savings. Like, I have this almost unhealthy desire to build up this retirement savings and have this that's over an abundance of what we'll need, even if I were to live in my 90s. I'm not living in my 90s. I like hamburgers and other things way too much. I'm already resigned to that fact, but my wife certainly can. Right, but but I have this like well beyond. And so I have to really watch myself about that. And I think a question to ask yourself is, what is your most valuable commodity? Right? What is your most valuable commodity? And I think that if we're honest with ourselves, the general answer on this can be things that sound and are great. We might say, well, mine is my children. Like, they're not a commodity, but they're the most valuable thing that I treasure. Or my spouse. They're the most valuable thing that I treasure. Or we might look and we might say, like, yeah, it's my home. Like, I love my house. I love where we live. It's my most valuable thing that I treasure. I will do everything to keep it. It's my time. Like, my time matters so much to me, and I try to maximize every second of every day. So I want you to think about this question, right? What if the answer is instead my faith? My faith is the most valuable treasure that I've been given. What happens in our lives when we start to think about faith as the most valuable gift we have every day? More important than your children, more important than your spouse, more important than our retirement funds, more important than our house, more important than our lives, more important than our time, when our faith. See, when we place faith at the center of our lives, it transforms our perspective on what truly matters. When we place faith as our most important treasure, it transforms our perspective in what truly matters, because our treasures are a reflection of our beliefs. And so, as disciples of Jesus, are our treasures the reflection of what matters most to us in our life? And what if we live that out? Church, what if we live that out now and not on our deathbed? Like, our deathbed is where it does always hit, and we say, the most important thing I have right now is death, or is Jesus, as I'm confronting death. But what happens if we don't wait till we're on that bed? What happens if we say it's now? And that's where I think Jesus is calling us in this last section and piece of his greatest sermon ever. In Matthew 6:20 and 21, it says this: stockpile treasures in heaven, where it's safe from moth and rust and burglars. So he's repeating what he's told us to do and why treasures in heaven matter. And it's obvious, isn't it? The place where your treasure is the place where you'll most want to be and end up being. The place where your treasure is where you'll most want to be and end up being. That word stockpile for me was a word that jumped out when I was reading this. And it jumped out to me because it's a reminder, like we were told, don't hoard, but now we're told instead, stockpile. Build up all these treasures that are in heaven. And what does that look like for us? Well, Luther had a lot to say on this, and he was very, very firm in his belief that he said, the person who is rich is not the person with the most stuff on this earth. Instead, it's the person who lives out their faith in the greatest way of sharing love, charity, and service. That a true wealth for Luther was someone who was sharing love, service, and charity with others. That was the wealthiest person that Martin Luther noted in his day. And then he went on to say, our hearts should be set on eternal values, love, charity, and service, and serving others. That's where our hearts align to stockpile. And so, how are you doing? How's it going when we think about what am I stockpiling in heaven? Are my treasures a reflection of what matters in the economy of God? Am I building that up? And how is that going? It's a question I'm asking myself. It's a question that I'm wrestling with. It's a question that I wrestle with how am I talking and teaching my children about what really matters for them. You see, faith and good deeds, helping others create a lasting impact in God's kingdom. And what ends up happening when we live that out is you leave behind a legacy that really matters. I was reading about Sarah, who's a middle school teacher here in Omaha. And Sarah was going through a really difficult time in her life. And she found herself at first kind of wallowing in her own self-pity party, and she realized that it wasn't helping her in any way. And so she said, instead of right now asking everyone to serve me in my most difficult hours, what if I served others? And she looked around her neighborhoods and she started serving other kids in other areas. And she went to community centers and she started volunteering and leading tutoring programs with the community center right there in her own neighborhoods. And she started mentoring and pouring into the lives of young men and young women that were outside of herself. And she realized and said that the legacy is that I am not taking, but I am giving. And she, maybe without even realizing it or knowing it, was affirming what our scriptures teach. That true wealth is measured not in what you have, but in, and say these words with me, what you give. Right? Not in what you have, but what you give. True wealth is measured in what you give. What are we giving in the areas of love, charity, and service? Intentionally, but also habitually. And habitually means, and I think this is an area that we as a church, the church on earth, Christendom, you individually, this is an area that we really can start to say, how am I doing habitually of this is just happening? It's just what I do. We don't even have to think about it. What happens when loving, serving, and charity becomes our habit? We just always are doing it. We don't even think about it, right? And for me, let me share with you how I'm working to make that into the habit. I think the greatest habit we have, where you don't even think about it, is the habit of getting dressed in the morning, right? Did you know this? Like, you have a pattern that you do when you get dressed in the morning. And I don't know what your pattern is. And candidly, like, I won't get specific with you about my pattern, and you don't need to get specific with me about your pattern. Please don't come up to me after the message or send me an email or text and say, I put my underwear on third or last. I don't really care. But here's what I know. You don't think about that pattern anymore because it's your habit. And how do I know? Try tomorrow switching your pattern, and maybe you'll walk out of the house without socks or underwear on. But like, get back home and go, oh yeah, that's right, okay? But what if our faith life, what if our treasures, what if what we were doing was so habitual for love, service, and charity that it is stockpiling rewards in heaven that we don't even think about it anymore? That when people say to us, wow, how you love that person, or how you did that, or how you treated them, like, that was amazing. Like, I would never do that. And you're like, what are you talking about? I didn't do anything different than what I normally do. That's when it becomes so habitual. And I would ask this question: if faith is your most valuable treasure, how are you using it? And how do you want to enjoy it? If faith is your most valuable treasure, how are you using it, and how do you want to enjoy it? And that's what happens when that treasure becomes the treasure of all treasures. All right, so next we're going to move into loving your neighbor. How are we loving our neighbor? So when we have the treasure that is faith, then it leads us to love our neighbor. Now we've learned this, and in the past 4 weeks we've been sharing this and sharing this and sharing this. We should know the mark of a disciple is simply doing what Jesus says to do. Right? So the mark of the disciple is one. Oh, let's do that again. Because in Fremont, they said it great. Here we go. The mark of a disciple is one. What Jesus says. Right? So that's what a mark of a disciple is. So then you might ask yourself, you might be like, well, what does Jesus say to do? Like, there seems to be a lot of things that Jesus says to do. Can I just give you 2 things? And these are the 2 that matter most. Of all the things that you think Jesus says to do, they'll sum up very nicely, very succinctly in a way that is memorable, which is what to do. Just 2 things. Can you remember 2 things? Can you do that? Yes. All right. Here they are. Ready? It's going to blow your mind. They're already on the screen. So, love God with your whole heart, soul, and mind. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Now, I think the one about love God, like we all go, yep, get it, got it. Can't do it all fully. This is grace. This is forgiveness. This is Easter, right? We get that, but we're always striving. We know who God is. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Done. Love your neighbor. Who is my neighbor? Great question. They even asked Jesus that question. Well, who's really my neighbor? Your neighbor is whoever you're around, whoever you're next to, whoever you're front of. I was reminded of this. I'm going to just confess to you right now that I needed to remember who my neighbor was. I was on an airplane probably 6 months ago, and I like to sit in the emergency exit rows because on the airline company I fly, they have the most leg room, and when you're my height, all the leg room matters. And so I always try to get don't know why you're laughing. It's just true. It's something I'm burdened with. So I'm always looking for the most leg room. So I got my window seat, exit row, have my leg room, and then I leave the middle as open as I can. And then another guy sat in the aisleway, and I thought, okay, this is great. And we were told it wasn't going to be a full flight, and so it was terrific. And I was like, great, half the people coming on have kids, so they can't sit here, and so that's great, and all this stuff. And then no one sat next to us. So he and I just had the middle row, and it was great. Well, he expanded his territory with all his trash. Like every single one of his pretzel things went into the side thing. Empty cups went there. Like his bag went there. iPad went there. All this stuff. And I'm a little bit of a germ person, so like I'm kind of looking, and I'm just like, that's too close to me. And that's not. And then every time the flight attendant went by with the trash bag, like all 85 times, like he'd be like, nope, no trash. And I'm like, dude, there's a ton of trash. Like, clean up your stuff, because this is not your house, and we are not roommates, and I don't like your stuff. So I realized, like, the flight attendant did the last cleanup, right, where they're like, we're getting ready, and we're going to start our initial descent. And so I've asked the flight attendants to come through and clean up the cabin for us to land. And I realized he had all his stuff. So I texted my friend, and I said to him, the guy's going to leave all his stuff here. And now I'm thinking, like, I'm going to take on the cause of the flight attendants. And I was like, it's so rude. The flight attendant's going to have to pick up his trash, and it's super disgusting. And he's got, like, cups and all this stuff. I said, I think I should just, as we get up to leave, I should say, sir, do you want to take all your trash with you? I bet there's a trash can on the outside. And I texted that. And my friend wrote back, and he said, or you could be like Jesus and just pick it up for him. And I was like, you're a jerk. Fine, I'll be like Jesus, love my neighbor. I honestly didn't pick it up. I just walked away and was I'm still guilt-ridden about it. But yeah, right? And so here's the thing. Being a good neighbor isn't about hoarding everything or living in scarcity. What's it about then? It's about embracing the abundance of and sharing it freely. You know, like, this is way more, friends, than like going out and snow blowing your neighbor's front yard or front driveway because the blizzard has hit after an 85 degree. Like, what happened? How does that happen? Anyways, so it's more than that. It's more than just giving cookies when you know your neighbor died. It's more than just like going out and picking up the trash can. Like, love is an abundance of love and sharing it freely, intentionally and habitually, and sacrificially. I want to introduce you to a woman named Danko. She's 75 years old. I met her in Uganda 2 weeks ago. Danko has 4 huts. That's all she has. She's got 2 goats, a cow, or called a heifer. She's 75. Her daughter has died and left her with 6 grandchildren, ages 5 to 12. And she walks over 4 miles to get water. She walks over 4 miles to go to the care point to help her son or her grandson get into secondary school. And there's no stores, there's no groceries. 75-year-old woman. She has a cow that she traded 3 goats for, so that if any of the kids get sick and need to go to a hospital, she can sell the cow to pay for their medical visits. As we left that day, 6 Americans who are in the top 1% of the wealthiest people in the world, and if you make over $50,000 a year, you're in that same boat. As we left, she said, I have a gift for you. And one of the grandchildren ran off and came back and was holding upside down a live chicken. And she said, it's yours. And she said, I want to say thank you for coming to my home and being with me. Now, for us, this chicken didn't mean much in that it wasn't going to change our lives except for the emotional toil. For her, this chicken was a lifeline. It's that provides eggs, provides food, it provides insurance if needed, and she sacrificed it. She loved her neighbor who was there. Now let's just bring this down to ways we can practically work. What does it look like to love your neighbor? First, I'm going to say to you, you can't love someone you don't know. So I'm going to invite you to just start with loving your neighbors, the ones that are in front of you every day. Do you know their name? Do you know the neighbors on the right of you, on the left of you, across from you, behind you? Know their name. And if you don't, come out and say, you know what, we've lived across from each other for 5 years. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. What's your kids' names? And then pray for them privately by name. Bless them consistently in and out of season. When you see a need, just meet it without expectation, without them seeing it, without them knowing. And love them recklessly, when in need and not in need. Do what Danko did for us. We became her neighbor in that day. In Matthew 6:22, it says, your eyes are windows into your body. If you open your eyes wide in wonder and belief, your body fills up with light. If you live squinty-eyed in greed and distrust, your body is a musty cellar. And so open your eyes. Let the light of the love of Jesus love your neighbor and share that love. He goes on to say, if you pull the blinds on your windows, what a dark life you have. You can't worship two gods at once. Loving one God, you'll end up hating the other. Adoration of one feeds contempt for the other. You can't worship God and money both. And here's what he's talking about, treasures. We live so much, I think, that we've made our treasures what give us what we want, that we've forsaken our neighbors. We pull into our 2 and 3 car garages and we shut the garage door before we even get out of the car. We don't know or see our neighbors, and we think we've got everything to our heart's content. What would your neighbors say about you? How would they know you? Even here at church, it's why we say, like, high five, shake a hand, get to know the person. What are they going to say about you? How are you showing love? Because at the end of the day, when we're loving our neighbors and when we know where faith is our treasure, it actually provides us what we are desiring and yearning for the most. Peace. Peace out, people. Right? You want to say peace out. Peace out when we go into that new heaven and that new earth and we receive all the rewards that we've been stockpiling in heaven. And how do we do that? We do that by simply loving our neighbor. Now, we all have things that we're looking for peace from in this life. Every one of us has a junk drawer. This is my junk drawer in our house. You see it in there, right? Like that's my junk drawer, right? We all have a junk drawer in your house, things that we don't want to have. All right, look at these junk drawers. I asked on Facebook, I said, tell me your junk drawers. Show them, put them on Facebook. Here's what these people are sick. Like, you don't want to go to their house. Because they're going to be like, oh, your shoes have dirt, right? Here's a couple others, right? Like these are normal. This person has a checkbook. If you're under 40, you don't know what to do with that. I don't even know why they still have that. They probably don't even use it. It's like a memorabilia thing, and it's in their junk drawer, right? Okay, what else do we got here? Like, look at this one. Someone likes Arby's, so they just don't like good food. And then, like, these people, like, don't go to this guy's house. He's got his junk drawer, a flashlight, tennis ball, King of Kings. They go here, but then there's some bullets. Like, just, I don't know, not going there. And then, you know, we see those. We all have junk drawers, right? But here's what Jesus says to us. He says in Matthew 6, as he wraps up everything, he says, look at the lilies of the field and the birds of the air. How much do I provide for them? How much will I provide for you whom I love? You want peace? Just look around. Be in nature, spend the first article gifts, hear the birds, and remember, God loves you more than them. He died and rose for you. And our faith puts everything in our God where we find true peace. So I want to invite you today to ask yourself the question as you go to bed tonight. Is faith my most valuable treasure? Is this what matters most to me? And I want to invite you this week, learn the name of one more neighbor. One more neighbor. And find this amazing peace as you live out being a disciple, doing the two things God calls us as disciples to do. To love God and to love your neighbor. I want to invite all campuses to stand up. And let's have a word of prayer over one another. Father God, we give you thanks and praise that you gave your Son for us, who showed us what it is to love you with our whole heart, soul, and mind, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. And so in this endeavor, O Lord, let us always know our greatest treasure, faith. Let us love one another as you love us. And let us find a peace that surpasses all understanding as we stockpile our treasures in heaven. And as you have finished our home to its fullest, to its grandest, and to its eternal delight. We love you and we're loved by you, and all of God's people said,